Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain is one of the world's strangest amusement rides. Located at the Indiana Beach Boardwalk Resort in Monticello, Indiana, this distinct wooden roller coaster takes riders along for quite the unique thrill, as it weaves in and out of an abandoned mine. As of the recording of this video, I've ridden 555 different roller coasters, and Lost Coaster stands out as one of the most bizarre of them all. This is a must-ride attraction that I highly recommend taking for a spin. Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain has quite an interesting history. It's a conversion of the older Superstition Mountain dark ride that operated in the same artificial mountain Lost Coaster does today. Along with that, the ride has a long list of what I find to be interesting issues or operational quirks that make this ride even stranger. Of course, none of these issues pose any danger to riders, but they are interesting to learn about. In my opinion, it makes riding Lost Coaster even more intriguing. In this episode of Problematic Roller Coasters, we'll be taking an in-depth look at Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain, as we learn all about its history, ride experience, and operational flaws. This video was made possible by Staples, who is son of Gene Staples. Gene Staples is responsible for saving Indiana Beach after it closed in 2019 when its older operator went bankrupt. Supplied basically all of the technical information that you'll hear about later in the video, as well as much of the historical information. If you guys wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that would be greatly appreciated, as that helps the channel greatly against the YouTube algorithm. Alright, let's dig in. Indiana Beach is located on Lake Schaefer in Monticello, Indiana. Lake Schaefer was created in 1923, when a hydroelectric dam was built on the Tippecanoe River about 2 miles north of Monticello. The backwater of the dam created the twin lakes of Lake Schaefer and Lake Freeman. At the time, a man by the name of Earl Spackman saw the potential for Lake Schaefer to serve as a vacation destination. Spackman worked as an accountant for the Ideal Furnace Company at the time and turned his vision of Lake Schaefer into Ideal Beach. Spackman would open Ideal Beach in 1926. It included a small bathhouse, a drink stand, and 10 rowboats. In 1927, the park added a hotel, rental cottages, and its first thrill ride, a toboggan water slide. Even with the Great Depression occurring around this time period, Earl Spackman took this as an opportunity to expand the park further and secured a loan to purchase the entire Indiana Beach Peninsula. His gamble would pay off. The shoreline would continue to expand and become home to the White Point Resort Hotel, Ideal Beach Hotel, cottages, and even a casino and dance pavilion. There were also several campgrounds, lodges, bait shops, and boat docks surrounding the lake. In 1945, Earl's son, Thomas Spackman, would take over as CEO of Ideal Beach, and in 1952, he renamed the property to Indiana Beach. At the time, competition became fierce from other lakes in northern Indiana that also offered summer resorts. Spackman would fire back by creating an amusement park at Indiana Beach, styled as a miniature Coney Island of sorts. Some of the original amusement rides included a Ferris wheel, a merry-go-round, a rolloplane ride known as Bullet, a roller rink, and horseback riding. The park even opened a small roller coaster named Little Dipper, built by the Allen Herschel Company. During the 1970s, Spackman attempted to introduce a large dark ride at Indiana Beach. The Superstition Mountain dark ride would open at the park in 1978. Riders would climb aboard into small electrically powered mine cars and take a trip through an abandoned mine, filled with animals and other spooky surprises. Construction of the mountain took nearly 4 years. When the attraction was finally nearing completion, Mrs. Spackman, wife of Thomas Spackman, said enough was enough and ordered that construction be stopped. This led to the original mountain not featuring a peak and instead having a flat top. As far as how the attraction functioned, it was a very basic ride that relied on an electric current that ran through a middle rail of the track. The electricity from this rail would power the individual mine cars, allowing them to traverse the ride course. However, as simple as the attraction was in theory, it was actually quite problematic. The ride was unable to run in any kind of precipitation due to the amount of track located outdoors. This would cause issues with the electrical rail that powered the attraction. Even in the slightest drizzle, Superstition Mountain would have to shut down. The cars themselves were also plagued with electrical issues and deteriorated at a rapid rate. This led to the cars needing constant maintenance. Because of this, only 3 or 4 cars at a time would be on the track in operation. Combine the lack of cars with the attraction taking over 5 minutes to complete, and you got a very slow moving line. In fact, the line was often the longest at the park. Due to all these issues, Thomas Spackman decided that he wanted to alter the attraction to make it more reliable increase the ride's capacity, and make it more thrilling, all at the same time. Spackman's son, Thomas Spackman Jr., would turn to a company his family was familiar with, Custom Coasters International, or CCI, to handle this project. CCI was a well-regarded manufacturer of wooden roller coasters and had already built two of Indiana Beach's wooden coasters, Hoosier Hurricane in 1994 and Cornball Express in 2001. Cornball Express is an excellent wooden roller coaster. Some of CCI's other roller coasters include rides like the Raven at Holiday World or Shivering Timbers at Michigan's Adventure. That's just to name a few, but CCI has built a long list of reputable wooden roller coasters. The company was first founded on September 1st of 1991 as Custom Coasters Incorporated. The company rose from the infamous Din Corporation, who had built rides like Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas and Mean Streak at Cedar Point. In November of 2001, CCI announced that they had signed a deal with Indiana Beach to revamp Superstition Mountain into a wooden roller coaster. The ride would be called the Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain and would debut when the park opened for the 2002 season. Indiana Beach employees began to disassemble the track for Superstition Mountain as they prepped the ride for renovation. The plan was for Lost Coaster to utilize the existing layout and support structure of the original Dark ride and to keep the ride's original charm and theming present. Superstition Mountain's queue and station building were also removed to make way for the coaster. Due to the lack of available space, it wasn't feasible for Lost Coaster to feature a traditional lift hill. So CCI worked to implement a vertical elevator lift system, a first for the manufacturer. Another issue was the small size of the mountain. This would necessitate the use of small hairpin turns inside the building, turns much tighter than you'd find on a typical wooden roller coaster. Some of the turns on Lost Coaster would have a radius of less than 6 feet or 3 meters. CCI had previously built an indoor dark ride roller coaster called the Underground, which operates at Adventureland in Altoona, Iowa. The attraction opened in 1996 and runs 2-bench wooden coaster trains built by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters, or PTC. These PTC trains are what CCI used most often on their wooden coasters, but they wouldn't be able to handle the tight turning radius necessary for Lost Coaster. So CCI went to the drawing board and developed their own custom train that would be capable of the ridiculously tight curves. The team would end up developing the trains we see today that run on Lost Coaster, just minus the cages as those weren't deemed necessary at the moment. The trains feature dual articulating axles, which would make the hairpin turns possible. Construction would continue as CCI converted Superstition Mountain into a roller coaster. Lost Coaster would feature several enhancements to the original attraction, and one of them was that the coaster would not only take place within and around the existing mountain, but also on top of it. The elevator lift would take riders to the roof of the building, where the coaster would then wind its way on top of the mountain and then into the existing outdoor section of the ride that runs alongside the antique cars. For this section of the ride, CCI would remove the original track atop the steel support structure, then add additional steel support structure and wooden track on top. This section of the ride is certainly more thrilling than it used to be. Within the mountain are 3 floors. Here's a picture of floor 3 completely gutted. On Lost Coaster today, this is the first indoor part of the attraction, where the coaster completes several indoor turns and zigzags before taking a brief pause in the mid-course brake run. CCI actually had an idea to add a turntable to the mid-course brake run, which would reverse the direction of the train. This was never brought to fruition, however, since there is not enough space in the cramped mountain. A double down follows that mid-course brake run and leads into a sharp right curve that takes the coaster outside the mountain. This part of the ride also existed on the original Superstition Mountain, except with Lost Coaster's new layout, it heads up this section of track in the opposite direction compared to the original. This is where the coaster enters the second floor of the building, where I believe the ride takes the original path Superstition Mountain did, only backwards. CCI made a major change here and had the coaster exit the rear of the mountain, unlike Superstition Mountain. After extending out and making a sharp left curve, the coaster takes its final drop into a spinning tunnel, which was part of the original Superstition Mountain. This section of the ride is located on the first floor of the building. Lost Coaster exits the building in the same location that Superstition Mountain did. Only now, the ride climbs an odd drive tire lift hill that brings the coaster back up to the height of the station. Construction would continue into the spring of 2002. Following all the work, the ride would begin testing where a few issues were immediately noticed. The ride originally featured a different coupler between the 2 cars of each train. The coupler is the steel linkage that connects both cars. On the ride's first test run, the original coupler failed on this turn here, the antique turn. The coupler bent in an unexpected way and then snapped in 2. This failure led to a necessary redesign of the trains as well as the coupler itself. The coupler would end up becoming much longer in length and is what we see operating on the ride today. Another change made to the ride was the addition of cages on top of each car to enclose riders within the ride vehicles. This was done due to the tight clearances found inside the attraction, to keep riders safe from the mountain or other objects within arm's reach. On June 6th of 2002, the newly revamped Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain would open to the public, just 1 year after Indiana Beach had also opened Cornball Express. Lost Coaster opened to quite rave reviews and was highly regarded amongst roller coaster enthusiasts. The custom trains built for the attraction offer the ability to ride the coaster forward or backward. The backwards opportunity is a real treat and really changes the overall experience of the coaster. As for CCI, the company would unfortunately go bankrupt in 2002. Lost Coaster would be one of the last rides the company would ever construct, alongside the New Mexico Rattler at Cliffs Amusement Park. Luckily, the engineers within CCI who had developed Lost Coaster would go on to form the Gravity Group. The Gravity Group still builds new coasters to this date, and has built some of the world's best wooden roller coasters, like the Voyage at Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana, or Hades 360 at Mount Olympus, which I'm also considering making a problematic roller coasters video for. Comment down below if you'd like to see that. I got the opportunity to ride Lost Coaster twice during a recent visit to Indiana Beach. I first attended Indiana Beach in 2017, but missed out on Lost Coaster due to a power outage. My first ride was in the front car facing backwards, and my second ride was in the second car facing forwards. I've got the ride stats up on the screen, and looking on paper, they are nothing impressive whatsoever. But even with these childish stats, Lost Coaster delivers a more fun and intense ride than many of the larger coasters I've ridden, in my opinion of course. My first ride on Lost Coaster left me speechless. You begin your experience by boarding into either the front or back car. Each car features one forward row and one backward row, leaving riders facing each other inside each cage. As far as restraints go, each rider has their own seatbelt, and there's also an odd lap bar that serves more like a grab bar. It doesn't come in contact with your body whatsoever. The train dispatches out of the station and rolls into the elevator shaft. The elevator lifts your train vertically to the top of the mountain, where a skeleton animatronic sitting in one of the original Superstition Mountain vehicles asks if you really trust the elevator you're riding, and to watch out for a bear. The elevator reaches the top of Superstition Mountain and then dumps your train into the course. The train takes a slight left turn and then hits a right-hand turnaround that delivers riders a decent amount of lateral forces as they head into a small tunnel. The train rides over a small hill, which delivers another moment of lateral forces, and heads into two back-to-back airtime hills. The airtime on this ride is pretty awesome, since you basically don't have a restraint. It's just you in the cage. Up next is a classic CCI-like turnaround, delivering a pop of airtime followed by sustained laterals as the train turns left. There's no seat divider, so be prepared to slide around. Next is a triple up, which delivers a small pop of air on the first leap. This takes riders back inside the mountain, where the train begins to quickly zigzag through the small corridor, delivering back-to-back moments of quick lateral forces. The train rides through a right-hand turn and comes to a stop at the mid-course brake run, where Dynamite Willie shouts "Fire in the hole." The train releases from the brake run and descends an indoor double down, which offers airtime and laterals as it curves to the right. After a tight pullout, the train rides through a right-hand turn as it emerges from the mountain and heads back into it. This takes riders into another small corridor filled with effects as the train zigzags left and right. The train continues rolling as it exits the mountain and heads towards another drop. It almost feels like the train is about to run out of speed as the drop approaches. The train heads down this last drop and re-enters the mountain, where it traverses through another tight corridor. The tunnel is again filled with various special effects that go off as your train tears through the tight turns and corners, delivering very random moments of lateral forces. It's a wild ending. The train then emerges back out of the mountain as it heads up a strange tire drive lift hill into the final brake run. Overall, to say the Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain is a unique roller coaster is an understatement. This has to be one of the weirdest amusement park attractions I have ever experienced, and I honestly love it. The ride is just different, has cool theming, it's charming, and delivers a wild roller coaster experience as well, especially when sitting backwards. Everything that happens on the ride feels so random. It's really hard to predict what exactly it does next, and I was happy I went into the experience without knowing much about what the ride did. My first backwards ride left me stunned as we rode through the indoor double down and all the crazy zigzags found inside the mountain. It should also be mentioned that the ride is quite smooth. At least the trains track very smoothly, there's not really any bumps, but be prepared to get jostled around by the airtime, lateral forces, and lack of seat dividers. If you're not a fan of being thrown around, this is probably not the ride for you. Lost Coaster is my favorite attraction at Indiana Beach because of its craziness. It's seriously like nothing I've ever ridden, and I recommend that everyone go try out this coaster. Now, while Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain is both a safe and enjoyable attraction, it can be quite problematic. The ride does suffer from many day-to-day issues that can make it an operational headache. The ride is quite sensitive when it comes to speed, just as most coasters are, but due to the nature of the attraction, Lost Coaster is extra sensitive. Along the ride's layout are many valley-prone areas. This means there are many locations where when conditions aren't ideal, the train may not have enough speed to clear a hill. This causes the train to stop along the layout, either at a flat portion of track or at the base of two hills. To counteract these issues, operators must pay attention to the amount of weight in each train. Depending on how fast the ride is running, operators must always load a minimum of 4 to 6 riders into the 8-passenger trains. They must also front load each train, meaning riders must be loaded into the first car of a train before the second. During morning checks, I only saw the ride making test runs when maintenance members were seated inside the first car. By front loading each train and ensuring the right amount of weight is present, this helps ensure Lost Coaster makes it around the track every time. But let's go through all the areas where the ride is known to valley. One of the most common locations is the mid-course brake run inside the mountain, also known as Brake 4. The mid-course brake run is following a triple up and section of curved and zigzag track. If the train isn't riding fast enough into the brake run, it will not stop far enough forward to trigger a proximity switch. This proximity switch is what allows the brake to open once the train is stopped. Otherwise, if the proximity switch doesn't detect the train in the right position, it will not open the brake, as the train could roll backward instead of forward. Front loading the train helps tremendously here. Now when this occurs, maintenance members will need to climb to the train and then manually release the brake and push the train forward into the double down. Sometimes the ride will run so slowly that a train won't make it to the mid-course brake at all. There is an anti-rollback device as the train rises into the brake run to help prevent rollbacks. I'll explain the anti-rollback system on this ride in just a little bit. If the train runs too slowly, it will roll backwards and catch the anti-rollback system and remain in place, rather than rolling backward further into the layout. This leads to an easier recover for the park's maintenance team. On the contrary, if trains run too fast, they can overshoot the mid-course brake run or even slip completely through it. This can occur when it's hot outside or if the wheels or track are well oiled, leading to excessive speeds. When this happens, the ride will fault and need to be reset. This involves resetting the ride's computer, which takes about 2.5 minutes. Trains can also valley before the mid-course brake run. In 2012, the park placed 2 sets of anti-rollbacks on the triple up that climbs back into the mountain, with a set on the second leap and another set on the third leap. If you're not familiar, an anti-rollback system, or ABS, is used on roller coasters to prevent trains from rolling backwards. They are found on lift hills and are what produce the classic click-clack you hear as a train climbs a lift hill. Some coasters also feature them along a ride layout, on hills where coasters are more prone to valleying, especially wooden roller coasters. On almost all other roller coasters, the trains feature a movable anti-rollback dog called a pawl. On the track is a steel rail called a rack with asymmetric teeth sloped upward. The pawls will fall into the grooves between the teeth under their own weight as the train moves up the lift. Here we see a video of them bouncing up and down between the different teeth. If the train stops, the pawl will lock between 2 teeth of the steel rack, holding the train in place. Lost Coaster reverses that, and instead has the fixed anti-rollback teeth on the bottom of the trains, and the movable pawls on the track itself. In fact, it's the brake fin on every car that functions as the anti-rollback teeth. Each brake fin is cut in a way that it's shaped like anti-rollback teeth. Anyway, it's possible for Lost Coaster to valley during the triple up, and even before that. Earlier this season, the ride valleyed at this location during a morning test run, which is almost immediately after the elevator lift. Maintenance workers had to push the train out of this location so that it could make its way through the rest of the circuit. The ride can also valley later in the ride. Another common valley point is after the mid-course brake run at the top of the turnaround here. This location on the ride also features an ABS. The next valley-prone area is on what the park calls the antique turn. This is the part of the ride where it extends out of the mountain and makes a sharp left turn next to the Antique Autos ride. When there isn't enough weight in the train will come to a stop on this section of track and not head down the drop back into the mountain. Following this drop is a set of fixed magnetic trim brakes that always slow a train as it re-enters the mountain. If there also isn't enough weight present, it can valley in the lower part of the mountain before the train scene. The issues don't stop there, however, and continue into the drive tire lift that elevate trains back up to the station. The drive tire lift doesn't start at ground level, so trains need enough speed so that the first car rides up the hill and engages the tire drives. The drive tire lift also features a left curve in between the two sets of tires. Remember how earlier I mentioned that the ride was designed to use a different coupler between the two cars? This original coupler was shorter than the one used now, and the drive tire lift was designed with the shorter coupler in mind. Because the train is now longer, it doesn't ride through the tire drive lift as it was intended to. The front car will begin to exit the upper pair of drive tires as the second car is heading to the upper pair. With no tires engaged on the first car, the lower drive tires need to throw the second car up to the higher pair of drive tires. So for a brief second, the train is coasting uphill and begins to slow down until the second car makes contact with the upper pair of tires. This is another reason why the front car must be loaded heavier than the rear car, to help keep the train moving as it rounds the top of this hill. If the train fails to climb the lift properly, it will roll backwards and valley inside the mountain. If the tires are too wet, or if too much weight is in the back car of the train, it will also roll back down the lift. Unfortunately, anti-rollbacks cannot be added to this lift hill as the drive tires aren't strong enough to move a train that is at a dead stop. So a stalled train must be pushed up into the tire drives. To help keep the drive tires dry, the park installed a covering over the drive tire lift in 2014. There is also an air hose available at the drive tires that is used to help dry them off whenever necessary. The hose is hooked up to the ride's air compressor. Overall, Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain is more prone to valleying than your average roller coaster. A ride I know very well, like El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure, only really has one location where the train is prone to valleying during cold or windy weather. Right at the end of the ride during the climb into the final brake run. Lost Coaster, on the other hand, has a multitude of places where trains can valley. I believe this has to do with just how long the coaster is and how little speed trains travel in the first place. With the height of just 35 feet or nearly 11 meters, trains have a small amount of energy that must carry them from the top of the elevator lift to the bottom of the tire drive lift. A journey that takes over 80 seconds. In many locations where the ride is prone to valleying, the train is only traveling at a few miles per hour, whereas larger roller coasters will round the highest hills with a bigger buffer. As small as Lost Coaster is, it packs a ride duration longer than most roller coasters. Now, even with that long of a duration, the ride only packs in 1,400 feet, or 427 meters of track. Most rides this long can only run one train, but Lost Coaster is capable of running 3. Making multi-train operation possible are different block zones scattered around the ride. For those of you who are unfamiliar, a block zone is a section of ride that only one train may occupy. At the end of a block zone is a method to stop a train in case the block zone ahead is still occupied. This is the safety system that prevents roller coaster trains from colliding into one another. Pictured here is the block zone diagram of Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain. The block zones are as follows: the station, the vertical lift, the mid-course brake run, and the final brake run. The mid-course brake run is the brake run located inside the mountain mid-ride. The final brake run is located immediately after the drive tire lift at the end of the ride. This gives the coaster a total of 4 block zones, which is the minimum required to run 3 trains. Larger roller coasters like Millennium Force at Cedar Point can run 3 trains just fine with only 4 block zones. But due to the vertical lift and the placement of the mid-course brake run on Lost Coaster, 3 train operations becomes more of a bottleneck than an efficient operation. Let me explain. Because Lost Coaster doesn't have a standard chain lift like most roller coasters, it cannot dispatch the next train from the station as soon as the train ahead clears the lift hill. Instead, the elevator lift must dump a train into the course and then descend back to the ground. Once the elevator parks on the ground, the next train from the station can then be dispatched. The ride stacks 3 trains as follows. Train 1 will be in the station, Train 2 will be stopped on the final brake run, and Train 3 will be stopped on the mid-course brake run. With the speed of the elevator lift, the elevator doesn't return to the ground until the train on the track is just seconds from stopping in the mid-course brake run. So when running 3 trains, the elevator lift basically forces all trains to stack every single cycle. From here, the ride must dispatch Train 1 that is parked in the station, allowing Train 2 in the final brake run to advance into the station. And only then can Train 3 on the mid-course brake proceed forward and finish the ride after an awkwardly long pause on the mid-course brake run. On top of that, the ride crew only has about 40 to 50 seconds to load each train before they must dispatch. A rather short amount of time to load the odd trains found on Lost Coaster. A ride like Millennium Force at Cedar Point is similar in concept to Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain. It also runs 3 trains with just 4 block zones and features an elevator lift hill, except this time it's an elevator cable lift rather than a vertical elevator lift. Either way, the next train cannot dispatch until the catch car returns to ground level, just like the elevator lift on Lost Coaster. However, 3 train operations on Millennium Force work because the ride's 4th block zone is located at the end of the ride, rather than the middle of the ride like the mid-course brake run on Lost Coaster. This gives the elevator lift more time to return to ground level as the train on the track rounds the circuit. On Millennium Forest, the cable lift is ready to accept the next train as the train on the track flies past the station over the speed hill. But even if the ride crew doesn't dispatch the next train right away, the third train can finish the circuit and come to a stop on the final brake run, directly before the unload station. If Millennium Forest were more like Lost Coaster, picture the second large airtime hill being the fourth block zone instead, rather than the brake run directly before the unload station. This would force a train to sit stopped on this hill every single cycle for an awkward amount of time. Could you just imagine how much that would interrupt the flow of the ride? Now on Lost Coaster, regardless, a train always stops on the mid-course brake run, but this is due to a show scene that takes place here with Dynamite Willie. The train only stops for a few seconds to let the show scene play out and then continues through the ride, allowing the train to stop for any longer, and then we get something more like Expedition Everest when that runs 5 trains. Be sure to check out my problematic roller coasters video on Expedition Everest to get an idea of what I mean. Now Indiana Beach could counteract this issue by reprogramming Lost Coaster to add an additional block zone. This straight piece of track before the elevator lift could be a 5th block zone. With an additional block zone here, the park would be able to dispatch the next train in the station before the elevator lift returns to ground level. This means the station and final brake run block zones would clear in time to allow the train hitting the mid-course brake run to continue through the circuit. It could lead to a much smoother time for 3 train operations. Now for whatever reason, CCI never programmed the ride like this, and I imagine the ride will continue to operate just as it does now, running a maximum of 2 trains. Going back to the ride's vertical elevator lift, this can also be a source of downtime. The elevator lift is hydraulic, and due to the way it operates, there are many ways the elevator can throw a fault and shut down the ride. Most of the faults involve a hydraulic line blowing or a hydraulic pump going bad. In all cases of downtime involving the elevator lift, the ride must be shut down as maintenance figures out what exactly is wrong with it, and then tends to the issue. The issue at hand will determine how long the ride will be closed for. Some issues with the elevator lift are resolved in 10 minutes, while others can take as long as a week to fix. But regardless, even if the elevator lift may occasionally be unreliable, you're never in any danger of getting stuck on the lift for a long period of time. When the elevator gets stuck, maintenance can use a lever to manually release hydraulic fluid from the elevator system. They slowly pull on the lever to gradually release hydraulic fluid, which lets the elevator come back to the ground slowly and safely. From there, the cages are opened and riders are freed from the trains. Another odd thing about Lost Coaster is its storage shed, where trains are kept when not in operation. The storage area is located inside the mountain. To get to it, trains are dispatched out of the station and into the elevator lift. The ride's track continues through the elevator lift into a door, which is where the storage area is. But the track changes so that the train rides only along its upstop wheels, the wheels that normally ride underneath the track. To access the storage area, the brake on the elevator lift must be manually released. Now, due to the cages on top of each train, the trains are too tall to fit into the door opening. I believe this is because the door takes into account the original design of the trains, which did not feature cages. To make the trains fit, the cages are able to fold down to where they are completely flat inside the car. The storage area can hold a maximum of 2 trains, but only if the large couplers between the cars are removed. Before I close out the video, I'd also like to touch on the ride's track design. On almost every other wooden roller coaster, the track is built using 8 layers of wood, but Lost Coaster differs from that. The more intense sections on the ride are built out of the standard 8 layers of wood, as well as the final brake run and station area. But many of the lower stress areas of the ride are only built from 5 layers of wood. The track on the elevator lift is actually only 2 layers thick and is built on top of steel I-beams. Another strange thing is the use of steel plates atop the wooden track. Lost Coaster changes things up, and the steel plating that is normally used for the side friction wheels on the inside of the track is actually used for the main road running wheels on top of the track. So the steel plating here is much thinner in width compared to normal wooden roller coasters. Then for the side friction wheels, the steel plating used on Lost Coaster is actually the steel plating normally used for upstop wheels, the wheels that ride underneath the track. This steel plating is even thinner than that used for the side friction wheels. Looking at this picture here, notice that the side friction steel doesn't span the width of the entire top 2 layers of track. Compare this steel to the steel used on almost every other wooden coaster, and it's much thinner. So that will conclude this episode of Problematic Roller Coasters. Overall, Lost Coaster of Superstition Mountain must be one of the strangest roller coasters in existence, and it's one that I highly recommend to fans of a good coaster. The attraction is both a dark ride and a rather thrilling roller coaster combined into one. The odd trains that operate on the ride only help to increase just how weird the coaster is, with their backward facing rows and awkward cages. I wouldn't have it any other way. The coaster also comes with a lot of unique issues, especially when it comes to speed and weight. To be honest with you, there were a few locations on the ride where it didn't seem to make sense to me just how the coaster kept moving. It seriously felt like we should have run out of speed and came to a stop. I pray that when you attend Indiana Beach, Lost Coaster does not valley during its morning test runs. With your average roller coaster, there are maybe 1 or 2 spots where the train is more likely to valley, but Lost Coaster has a countless number of locations where this can occur. I guess this is what happens when you turn an already strange dark ride into an even stranger roller coaster. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you also learned something new. I'd also like to give another shout out to EM Staples, who helped make this video possible. EM is seriously an expert on this attraction. Alright guys, thanks for watching, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and peace out.